The heat clung to the pavement like it had nowhere else to go. It was a quiet Saturday in Bismarck, North Dakota. People moved slowly, slipping in and out of stores, kids running between parked cars, and families loading up their trunks with weekend supplies. Marcus Tate had just finished jogging. He wore dark gym shorts, a faded hoodie, and trail-dusted sneakers. Nothing flashy, nothing threatening. Just another man on an errand, scratching a few items off a list his mother texted him: gloves, a hose nozzle, some potting soil. He reached for the handle of Grady's hardware and pulled the heavy glass door open. "Hey! You! Stop right there!" The voice didn't belong to a store clerk. Before Marcus could fully register what was happening, two deputies came at him like a storm. One of them, a thick man with a red face and buzz cut, grabbed Marcus's arm, yanking his hoodie off center. The other blocked the door behind him like backup in a movie scene. "What's going on?" Marcus asked, calm but firm, raising both palms to show he had nothing to hide. "You know damn well," the older deputy snapped, then slammed Marcus against the brick wall just beside the entrance. The crack of impact echoed across the lot. A man unloading bags of soil stopped mid-motion. A teenage girl holding her bike froze with wide eyes. Marcus didn't resist. He just stared at the wall, his chest pressed flat against it, his breath steady. This wasn't fear. It was something colder, controlled. "You match the description," the younger cop muttered, yanking Marcus's arms back and cuffing them tight. Too tight. "I haven't even gone inside," Marcus said quietly. "My ID is in my back pocket." "Doesn't matter," the older one growled. "You're it." Cameras started coming out. Phones were aimed from across the parking lot. No one spoke up. No one intervened. A woman in a sundress gasped and looked away. An older man nearby said something under his breath, but didn't move. They shoved Marcus into the back of the squad car like he was garbage being taken out. He sat upright, jaw locked, his eyes fixed forward. His breathing never changed, but inside, a fire was growing. Not wild rage, just a low, heavy burn. The car idled for nearly 10 minutes. Static crackled on the radio. "Suspect already in custody across town. Different clothing. Doesn't match," the voice said. The older cop cursed. The younger one turned pale. No apology, no explanation. Just the door swinging open and the cuffs being yanked off. "Get out of here!" the red-faced cop barked like Marcus was an animal they were done playing with. Marcus stepped out slowly. The indentations on his wrists throbbed, his hoodie creased and dirty from the wall. He looked both of them in the eyes. Not a word. Not a raised voice. Just that same steady stare. "You'll hear from me," he said quietly. The older cop snorted and turned away. The younger couldn't meet his eyes. Marcus adjusted his hoodie, turned around, and walked toward the same hardware store door. Again. Eyes followed him. Whispers swirled in corners. Phones were still recording, but no one said anything. He grabbed a shopping cart, his fingers brushing the handle like nothing had happened. Gloves, hose, potting soil. But every step was measured. Every movement had weight. Outside, the two cops stood by their cruiser, pretending nothing had gone wrong. But something had changed. Marcus reached the checkout line, placed his items gently on the belt, nodded at the cashier, and paid in full silence. As he walked back to his car, loading his bags into the trunk, he paused. He looked out across the parking lot. Same families, same faces. But they were looking at him differently now. Not because he'd made a scene, but because he hadn't. He closed the trunk slowly, his hands brushing the edge. Then he whispered to himself, voice barely audible. "Tomorrow," and drove off without a sound. The screen door creaked as Marcus stepped into the house. His mother's voice floated in from the kitchen. "That you, baby?" "Yeah, Ma," he called back, pulling off his hoodie and sneakers by the door. The house smelled like fried chicken and pine cleaner. Familiar, safe. A world away from the parking lot that had just tried to swallow him whole. Francine Rucker popped her head around the corner, a towel in her hand. "You get everything?" "Yeah," he said, managing a small smile. "Got it all." She stepped forward, her eyes scanning his face like a scanner that didn't miss anything. "You sure you're all right?" Marcus hesitated. The words sat heavy in his chest. He could have told her about the wall, the cuffs, the crowd, the silence. But instead, he nodded. "Just tired." She didn't press. Just gave him a look that said, "I'm here when you're ready." Dinner was quiet. She filled his plate twice. He ate it all without saying much. The TV played in the background, a weather report murmuring about thunderstorms on the east side. Later, after the dishes were done and the house slipped into its nighttime rhythm, Marcus stood in front of the hallway closet. He opened it slowly. Inside hung a memory wrapped in fabric. His army dress uniform. The jacket was deep navy, sharp shoulders, ribbons neatly arranged on a velvet board. The combat infantryman badge still shined under the hallway light. He stared at it for a long time, then reached out and took it down. His hands were steady, deliberate. He laid everything out carefully on the bed: jacket, pants, polished shoes, belt, white gloves. It had been years, but nothing felt distant. Every piece still carried weight. Every thread had a story. His fingers brushed the silver badge on the chest. A flash came back. Afghanistan. The sound of choppers, sand in his mouth, his squad behind him, trusting him to lead. He hadn't worn the uniform in years, not because he was ashamed, but because he'd been trying to live like a civilian, to blend in, to stay invisible. But today reminded him that no matter how quietly you lived, someone could still drag you into the spotlight for the wrong reasons. And now, it was time to step into it on his own terms, not with rage, not with revenge, but with purpose. He sat on the edge of the bed, uniform beside him. The room was dim. Only the lamp on the nightstand lit his silhouette. In the reflection of the mirror, he saw himself. Shoulders still squared, back still straight, jaw still locked like it had been on base. His mother knocked softly on the door. "You all right in there?" He didn't answer right away. "Just thinking," he said. She stepped inside, saw the uniform, and her breath caught for a moment. "You sure about this?" Marcus nodded slowly. They need to see who they laid hands on, not to make a scene, just to remind them. Francine walked over and touched the ribbons on the jacket. "You don't have to prove anything to them." "I'm not trying to," he said. "I'm proving it to me." She looked at him long and hard, then gave him a soft nod and kissed the top of his head. "I'll have coffee ready in the morning." He watched her leave, the door closing gently behind her. The clock ticked on. Marcus didn't get much sleep that night. Not because of anger, but focus. His mind walked through every detail, every step. By the time the sun began creeping through the blinds, he was already awake, sitting in the same spot. The room hadn't changed. But Marcus had. Tomorrow had arrived. The morning air carried a quiet chill. Bismarck moved slow at that hour. School buses still warming up, shop doors unlocking one by one. The kind of silence before something shifts. Marcus stood in front of the mirror, buttoning up his dress blues. Each motion was calm, exact. The jacket hugged his shoulders perfectly, the brass polished so bright it caught the morning light. The ribbons sat in perfect rows. The combat infantryman badge glinted like it had its own heartbeat. He adjusted his tie once, no more, slipped on the gloves, pulled the polished shoes over firm, steady steps. Downstairs, Francine waited at the kitchen counter, clutching a travel mug. Her eyes scanned him, but she didn't say a word. Marcus walked in, boots tapping lightly against the floor. "You look like command just rolled in," she said, handing him the mug. He took it gently. "You sure about this?" Marcus met her eyes and nodded once. "It's the only way they'll listen." She didn't argue. She just placed a palm against his chest, right over the medals. "Walk in there like the man you are." "I will." He stepped out into the morning light, the door clicking shut behind him. It sounded louder than usual. The drive to the sheriff's department was short. Familiar streets passed by his window. Old diners, gas stations, churches just opening for prayer. But something in the air felt different. As he turned onto Avenue C, the squat brick building came into view. The American flag waved gently outside, a thin breeze pushing it east. Marcus parked 2 spaces from the front door, cut the engine, sat in the silence. His fingers flexed once in the gloves. No nerves, just readiness. He opened the door. A few people were already outside. A man with a clipboard, 2 women unlocking their bikes from the rack. They glanced over and froze. The man in uniform wasn't rushing. Every step had weight. He reached the glass doors, pulled one open, walked into the lobby like it was any other morning. Inside, the buzz of phones and quiet voices filled the space. A young deputy looked up from the front desk, and his face went pale. The name tag read, Jacobs. "Can I help you, sir?" Jacobs asked, the "sir" dropping out of his mouth like it didn't belong to him. Marcus removed his hat and tucked it neatly under his arm. "I'm here to file a formal complaint." Jacobs straightened. "Yes, sir. Chief Bowden is in. I'll let him know." Marcus gave a slow nod and stepped aside, standing tall in the center of the lobby. His boots shined like mirrors. Within minutes, civilians started trickling into the room. A woman paying a traffic fine. A man asking about a permit. Another dropping off paperwork. Each one paused. Eyes found Marcus. Conversations stopped. Phones came out, not blatantly, just casual scrolling that quickly turned into quiet recording. 5 minutes later, Chief Bowden stepped out. Wiry, thinning hair, tired eyes that had seen too much and ignored even more. He saw Marcus, and paled. "Morning," Marcus said coolly. The chief's throat moved once before he replied, "Morning. Let's step into my office." "In a moment." Marcus reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a neatly folded paper. "I'm filing an official complaint against Deputy Wade Coulson and Officer Brent Marbury. Assault, wrongful arrest, violation of civil rights." The chief reached for the paper. His hand shook just enough to notice. "Understood," he muttered. Marcus didn't stop. His voice echoed clean across the tiled lobby. "I expect a full investigation. Transparent. Public dot." Behind the desk, Jacobs looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. People kept watching. Some whispered. One woman in the back turned her phone sideways and kept recording. Marcus placed the paper down gently. Then, with slow precision, placed his hat back on his head. He didn't wait for permission. He turned and walked out. The sunlight hit him full in the face as he stepped outside. But he didn't flinch. Behind him, the building buzzed louder. And in front of him? The town had just been given its first look at the man they'd tried to erase. By noon, Bismarck wasn't quiet anymore. It started at Darla's Diner, where the regulars sipped bitter coffee and read old newspapers out of habit. But today, no one cared about the crossword puzzle. They were watching the video. A woman leaned across the booth, whispering, "You seen that black vet in uniform at the sheriff's office?" Her friend nodded. "Saw it on Facebook. Full military blues. Looked like he came straight from Arlington." Down the street, a high school teacher paused her grading to read a message on her phone. One of her students had texted a link. "Is this Marcus Tate? Didn't he go to West Ridge?" The answer came back fast. "Yeah, Sergeant Tate, class of '08. At the hardware store, the same one where it all began, employees huddled around the register. The younger cashier who'd rung him up the day before just stared at the screen, lips pressed tight. "He ain't just some guy," one of them muttered. By mid-afternoon, the local news picked it up. A short headline ran, "Decorated black veteran confronts local officers after mistaken arrest." It was just enough to spark a flame. People started talking louder. Not just black families, but old white ranchers, teens in school jerseys, retired Marines. The story was hitting something raw, something unspoken. At Memorial Park, a few veterans stood near the flagpole talking low. One of them, a Vietnam vet named Hank, tapped his cane twice before saying, "I don't care what color you are. You put on that uniform, you deserve respect." On social media, the clip hit 20,000 views by evening. By night, it passed 50. Comment after comment flooded in. "This is what dignity looks like." He didn't even raise his voice. Still hit harder than any protest I've seen. Share this. Don't let it get buried. Someone started a hashtag, #Stand with Sergeant Tate. It trended locally within hours. But Marcus didn't post about it. He didn't comment. He wasn't chasing attention. He was sitting on the back porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun disappear behind the neighbor's fence. His phone buzzed nonstop, but he let it. The only call he answered was from an old squad mate named Ramirez. "You good, brother?" Ramirez asked. Marcus chuckled under his breath. "I'm breathing. That's something." "You want me to drive up?" "Number not yet. Let's see where this goes." Ramirez paused. "Proud of you, man. You didn't fold." "Never been good at folding," Marcus said, then ended the call. By the next morning, things shifted again. Jessica Mullins, a sharp young reporter from Fargo, showed up in town. Blonde hair, tan trench coat, phone in hand. She had questions, and a camera crew. She stopped by the sheriff's department, but didn't get much more than a no comment. At the diner, she asked folks what they thought. Most didn't want to be recorded, but a few spoke. About damn time someone stood up to them. "I don't care what badge you wear. You don't get to treat a soldier like that." At the high school, Mr. Landers, the same principal who'd once handed Marcus his diploma, stood at the gate with tears in his eyes. "I taught that boy. He was respectful, brave, quiet. What they did to him? It's a disgrace." Jessica finally reached out to Marcus. He didn't say no, but he didn't say yes either. "I'll speak when the time's right," he told her. "After the department responds." She nodded. That's fair. For what it's worth, I think you're changing something. Marcus didn't reply, just nodded once. He wasn't interested in speeches. He was interested in the ground shifting under their feet and making sure it didn't shift back. Inside the sheriff's department, the air had gone cold. Chief Bowden stood in his office, the complaint still sitting on his desk like it was glowing. His hand hovered over it, then pulled away. Outside the door, Wade Coulson paced like a trapped animal, red in the face, fists clenched, muttering to himself. Brent Marbury sat frozen in a chair, his face pale, his eyes down. "This is ridiculous," Coulson growled. "We had no way of knowing who he was." "You had no way of knowing because you didn't check," Bowden snapped. "You cuffed a decorated Army vet in front of half the town." Silence filled the room. Marbury finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper. He didn't even fight back. Bowden turned toward the window. Outside, he could see the lot starting to fill with people. Some held signs. One read, "Respect is earned, not assumed." Another, "Justice for Marcus Tate." The mayor's assistant walked in, face flushed and sweating. "Mayor wants to see you now," she said. "He's furious." Bowden cursed under his breath. He looked back at Coulson and Marbury. "You better pray there's something left to salvage." Across town, the buzz had turned into a roar. Outside Darla's diner, tables were full, but no one was eating. They were watching updates on their phones, sharing clips, showing screenshots. "He walked in like a general," someone said. "Didn't raise his voice once," another added. At the local barber shop, a group of men leaned in around the TV. Footage from the lobby played on repeat. Marcus standing tall in uniform, the chief shaking, people whispering in the background. "You see the way he looked at them?" one man asked. "That wasn't just for him. That was for every one of us." Kids were talking too, at the high school lunch tables, on the football field, even in the halls. "My mom said he used to walk me to daycare when I was little," one girl said. "He's my cousin's godfather," another added. It wasn't just talk anymore. It was momentum, and it wasn't slowing down. Local businesses put signs in their windows. "We stand with Sergeant Tate." Churches added his name to prayer lists. Veterans groups issued public statements demanding an investigation. And then came the real crack. A letter, signed by 6 veteran organizations across North Dakota, was hand-delivered to City Hall. It demanded the immediate suspension of the officers involved and full transparency on the department's actions. One paragraph stood out: "If a man who wore the uniform of this nation can be treated like this in broad daylight, then no one is safe from such abuse." Meanwhile, Marcus stayed quiet. He didn't go on social media. He didn't hold a press conference. He didn't march. He waited. Let the truth do the walking. At home, his mother kept the curtains half drawn. She cooked. She cleaned. She prayed. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, watching the news quietly. Protests are growing outside the Bismarck Sheriff's Department today as the story of Sergeant Marcus Tate continues to gain national attention. He changed the channel. It didn't help. Every station had picked it up. Some local, some from nearby cities, even one from Minneapolis. Reporters were circling the story like hawks, but Marcus still hadn't spoken publicly. "He's playing it smart," Ramirez texted him. "They're sweating harder because you're quiet." In the station's back room, Coulson and Marbury sat in folding chairs, separated by silence. They could hear the chants outside. They weren't violent. They were worse. They were clear, calm, unified. We see you. We see what you did. This is not forgotten. The words hit harder than any headline. You think they'll fire us? Marbury finally asked. Coulson didn't answer, because he already knew. The badge wasn't going to protect them this time, and the man they thought was just another name on a report? He had become the name everyone in town couldn't stop saying. Marcus Tate. 3 days after the video went viral, the sheriff's department caved. The announcement came at a hastily scheduled press conference. The room was packed with local reporters, a few from regional outlets, and one camera from a national morning show. Chief Bowden looked like a man who hadn't slept. He stood at the podium, eyes sunken, collar stiff. Behind him was a representative from the state's Office of Professional Standards, arms folded, lips sealed. Bowden cleared his throat. Effective immediately, Deputy Wade Coulson and Officer Brent Marbury are placed on administrative leave, pending an external investigation. The cameras clicked. A murmur rippled through the room. Someone raised a hand. Will they face criminal charges? Another voice followed, sharper. How can the black community trust your department after this? Bowden stumbled through his answers. Phrases like ongoing review, procedural missteps, and community healing fell from his mouth like dead leaves. But the room stayed cold. And then someone in the back called out, Would you have cuffed him if he was wearing that uniform? Silence swallowed the space. Bowden didn't respond. He didn't have to. Outside, the crowd grew louder. Not angry, just persistent. Signs waved in the air. Flags fluttered. Kids sat on their parents' shoulders. One woman held a cardboard sign that read, Quiet strength is still strength. Back at Marcus's house, he watched the press conference from the couch. Francine sat beside him, a folded dish towel in her lap. She hadn't said a word through the whole thing. They're scrambling now, she finally said. Marcus nodded once. About time. His phone buzzed. Jessica Mullins again. She'd been patient, respectful, never pushy. Marcus picked up this time. I'll give you 15 minutes, he said. Tomorrow morning, Memorial Park. Just you and your cameraman. Jessica agreed instantly. The next morning, the park was empty except for a few joggers and a maintenance worker trimming bushes. Marcus stood beneath an old oak tree near the Veterans Monument. No uniform this time, just jeans, boots, and a black t-shirt. Jessica approached with a quiet smile and her cameraman trailing behind. You sure? She asked gently. Marcus nodded. Roll it. The camera clicked on. When they grabbed you, what was going through your mind? Marcus looked out across the field, then back at the lens. I wasn't thinking about myself, he said. I was thinking about all the people who never get a chance to prove who they are. About everyone who's judged before they get to speak. Jessica nodded slowly. What do you want people to take away from this? Marcus didn't blink. Respect isn't something you hand out when it's convenient. It's something you owe to every person you meet, no matter their color, their clothes, or where they come from. The cameraman lowered the rig. Jessica stood still for a beat. That was perfect. Marcus gave a small nod, then walked away without another word. The segment aired that night with no dramatic music, no voiceovers, just Marcus's words, standing on their own. And America listened. The clip was reposted on military forums, veterans' pages, civil rights groups, and news sites. People called in from cities and suburbs, from blue states and red ones. A retired general tweeted, "He didn't raise his voice, he didn't march, but he made us all stand still." At City Hall, the mayor finally addressed the town. He called Marcus a pillar of strength and issued a formal apology. Then he outlined reforms: mandatory racial bias training, new civilian review panels, and a public oversight board. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't everything, but it was something. At the town hall meeting, Francine stood during the Q&A. "My son didn't ask for cameras," she said. "He didn't ask to be the face of anything. He asked for what you should already give: a little respect. The kind you don't have to earn by wearing medals." The room went silent. Marcus sat 3 rows back. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just lowered his head for a moment and let it sink in. Later that night, as he sat on the porch with a cup of tea, cars rolled by honking. People waved. Neighbors dropped off letters, pies, thank you notes. Some said nothing, just nodded. And Marcus, like always, said little back. But in that silence, the town heard everything. Days passed. The noise of the protests eventually softened, but it didn't fade. The cameras packed up, the reporters moved on. Yet Bismarck had been forever changed. Quiet, subtle shifts rippled through the town like an echo that refused to die. At the post office, an elderly woman who had never once made eye contact with Marcus before now smiled as he stepped inside. She was in the middle of sorting through packages when she looked up, gave a small nod, and said, "Good morning, Sergeant Tate." Marcus nodded back, his expression calm, but inside he could feel the weight of the change. The kind of change you can't force, but can feel moving through the air, even when it's barely visible. At the grocery store, the clerk who once barely looked up from her register now greeted him with a soft, "Hey, Sergeant, you need anything today?" No one asked him about the officers anymore. No one questioned why he had done what he did. They had seen it. They knew. Francine noticed the change, too. She caught herself smiling more often, seeing Marcus stand a little taller, shoulders straighter. Not because of pride in the attention, but because of something deeper. One evening, Marcus sat on the porch, the familiar chirping of crickets filling the air. The streetlights flickered on one by one, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. His thoughts drifted back to that day outside the hardware store, the way his heart had pounded in his chest when they slammed him against the wall. But it wasn't fear. It was something else, something heavier. And it stayed with him until that moment when he had looked back at the cops and told them, "You'll hear from me." It wasn't about getting even. It wasn't about revenge. It was about respect, quiet strength, and showing the world that no one, not even a broken system, could take that away. He looked out at the quiet neighborhood, his eyes softening. Tomorrow would be another day, and another. Life moved forward, as it always did. But in small moments, things felt different. One of the young kids from the neighborhood waved as he passed by. Marcus waved back, the same small wave he had given to others his entire life. But this time, it felt like something more. Behind him, Francine stepped out with a warm mug in hand, the steam rising in the cool evening air. "You doing okay?" she asked, sitting beside him. "Yeah," Marcus said, taking the mug from her hands. "I'm good." Francine didn't say anything for a while. She just sat with him, the quiet stretching between them. She knew there was no need to ask for more. She already understood. The next morning, Marcus woke up early. He didn't check his phone right away, didn't look for headlines. Instead, he slipped into his running gear and stepped out into the crisp air. The neighborhood was still asleep, the streets empty except for a few birds hopping between trees. He ran down the same path he had taken for years, pushing himself, letting the rhythm of his feet hitting the pavement keep his mind clear. Every breath was steady. Every step was firm. He didn't have the answers for everything. He didn't know if the system would change overnight. But he knew one thing for sure. He had shown up, quietly, strongly, without ever raising his voice. And sometimes, that was enough to make things shift. As he finished his run and slowed to a walk, the sun peeked over the horizon. The town was waking up, slowly coming to life. He knew that today, things might be different, just like they had been yesterday. And tomorrow would bring more change, in ways big and small. He reached the corner of his street and stopped, looking down at the houses, the cars parked along the curb, the kids' bikes in driveways. Normal. Safe. But it wasn't the same. Something had shifted, just enough to make it feel like the world could be different. And maybe, just maybe, that was all it took. "Respect starts here," Marcus whispered to himself under his breath. He placed a hand over his chest, right where his medals once sat, and smiled quietly. Tomorrow would be another day. But today, it was enough. The end.